I took a company, we carved it out. It was about $450 million of revenue, and prepared a road show, brought the people along, hired new people, did all the things associated with taking a company public, and ended up ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange and taking the company public. I became chairman, CEO, and president of the company. And it was a fantastic experience. I was in over my head, really didn't know it at the time, but made a lot of really silly mistakes, but then I made some serious mistakes. And we got into trouble with the Securities and Exchange Commission. And I ended up understanding, what I had done and what my role had been as CEO. And so I pled guilty to a violation of Securities and Exchange Commission rules. And I was sentenced to 4 years in a federal prison.
You are listening to The Leadersmith, Darren Gertis.
So thanks very much for agreeing to talk. I mean, I don't know if this is really going to lead into anything, but I thought, given the things I see you write, the things I read that you write, and your areas of interest and all, I thought it would be at least good to, at a minimum, get to know each other.
Sure.
And I don't know how much you know about me, but I thought maybe I could spend just a few minutes giving
Sure.
you some background, and then we can talk to see if there's something that you believe would be worth exploring. So I've been around for quite a while. I'm 68. I'll be 69 end of this month, and I've had a kind of a varied career. Came to this country in 1958 from Cuba, emigrated from Cuba, and was educated in this country, and ended up in the corporate world. And I had the unique experience of joining a company as chief information officer back in the late 90s. And that had been my career path the whole time, had been in the technology realm. And so I joined this company that was, the name of the company was Cabletron. It was a competitor of Cisco. It was $1 billion company, and I was the chief information officer, their first ever chief information officer. And shortly after I joined, the chairman and CEO decided to split the company off into 4 pieces, 4 subsidiaries, and eventually to spin them off as separate companies. And so he retired and turned over the helm to a guy that had come in on an acquisition that he had made. And I thought, I'm going to have to move on because I really didn't get along with the guy. Make a long story short, he actually tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Listen, I think you should take the largest chunk of these 4 subsidiaries and become president of the subsidiary, and then work to spin it off." So I did, without really understanding what I was doing. I took a company, we carved it out. It was about $450 million of revenue, and prepared a road show, brought the people along, hired new people, did all the things associated with taking a company public, and ended up ringing the bell at the New York Stock Exchange and taking the company public. I became chairman, CEO, and president of the company. And it was a fantastic experience. I was in over my head, really didn't know it at the time, but made a lot of really silly mistakes, but then I made some serious mistakes. And we got into trouble with the Securities and Exchange Commission. And I ended up understanding, what I had done and what my role had been as CEO. And so I pled guilty to a violation of Securities and Exchange Commission rules. And I was sentenced to 4 years in a federal prison. So I served about 3.5 years. I got into a special program and ended up leaving prison. I entered prison January 4th, 2008, ended up leaving prison in late 2010, and learned a lot in prison. Obviously, I wish I had learned those lessons a different way.
Sure.
However, one of the things I learned that, and some of these things are obvious, right? Decisions, choices have consequences. But what I had failed to understand, and I interviewed, it must have been hundreds of fellow inmates, some of them CFOs, CEOs, attorneys, doctors. I mean, I spent a lot of time talking to a guy who had been the CEO of Rite Aid Pharmacy and who had ended up in prison as well.
So
And
your interviews were all prison interviews.
yeah, these are all prison
Okay.
interviews.
Well,
Yeah,
that's a very different base than most people get to interview. Like as a professor, that's not the crowd that I'm usually talking to when I do interviews. Okay.
yeah, yeah. And so, the interesting thing is that, and by the way, I also interviewed a lot of just what you might call common ordinary criminals. Um, to a man, I mean, this was all men in the prison with me because they don't mix the populations.
Sure.
But to a man, they all made bad decisions, and the thing about it is that they really didn't understand when they were making the decisions that you really should not be making decisions like that without some kind of framework or process by which to understand what it is you're deciding and what the ramifications are. I mean, you might think about, well, this is a potentially bad decision, but in my case, what I had failed to do is to work the outcome all the way through to the end and then to decide, okay, you know, what is the right decision here? So I spent time, and I speak on this now, by the way.
So
I sp-
before you go on,
yeah,
let me have you expand a little bit on that. So
yeah, yeah.
you were making decisions from the gut. You didn't get counsel. You didn't have legal advice. What was it that was the issue?
It was pretty much all of the above. Now, I did have legal counsel. I did have people on staff. I had a general counsel. I had a CFO. I tried to surround myself with people, but unfortunately, I surrounded myself with people that weren't giving good advice as well. Now, the fault was entirely mine. I had the ability to always say no, and but the thing that I did not base decisions on is what I call a framework by which to make them and a set of core values. Right? It's my belief that when you establish a set of um, really sound core values as a business person, as a leader,
Mhm.
and even personally, or even with respect to your family, those core values are what you stand in, and those core values are the way you live your life. So when a decision comes at you, you use those core values in making the decisions. I'll give you a quick example. If one of your core values is I want to be true to the environment and be a good steward, and we want to be a green company, or we want to be respectful of the resources that we've been given to take care of, and then here comes a deal with a company that dumps toxic chemicals or spews stuff into the atmosphere or just isn't a good steward. If one of your core values is to be a steward of the environment and to respect the environment, that's not a deal you want to get into because it's going to violate your core value. Same thing with, let's say, integrity is a core value. Lots of companies have core values, by the way. Many of them treat them like shelfware or PowerPoint presentations.
Mhm.
But let's say integrity is a core value. Then you can't have any tolerance for any violation of integrity. And so when you make decisions, you run them against these core values, and you make sure that they're congruent with the core values. And then you go through the normal return on investment. Is it the right strategy? That kind of stuff. But the beginning is the core values
Sure.
and the fact that, you know, you, so I found myself straying into gray areas, which is a killer in business. I mean, there's a lot of examples of this. You read the news and you've seen the people going all the way back to people like uh, Dennis Kozlowski of Tyco, and the Adelphia scandal and the MCI scandal, and even people like Martha Stewart and Bernie Madoff, and it just goes on and on and on. The interesting thing is that this doesn't stop. It doesn't act as a deterrent. When people go to jail, it doesn't act as a deterrent. And smart people continue to get in trouble. And I believe they do that is because they don't have a base of core values on which to make the decisions.
Let me ask about those core values. So the core values, if you do it right, it should help you make the decision predetermined, make the decision for you, right?
Right,
I mean,
right.
it should, like, no, I'm not going to do X because my values are Y. Now, uh, is the ranking of the core values important to your mind, or is it just having these five values? Because
I don't think so. I don't think that it's a matter of, well, this is number five, so I can be lenient there. You know, I think it's a matter of, hey, this is what I stand for. And by the way, part of this is communicating it and showing the organization or your family or personally that you walk the talk. That
right, okay,
this is not just BS. It's for real. Like if we believe customers and the customer relationship is important to us, then we better walk that talk. If we believe our employees are our greatest asset, and that's one of our core values, we better walk the talk. You know, it's interesting. Boeing has a value of quality, and they've violated that over and over. What kind of credibility do you have?
yeah. So, and that's a related question. I mean, so if it's just on the wall, it doesn't do anything. I mean, you can write anything that you want, put it up on the wall, put it on every wall on every building, and it still doesn't work. It has to be something that you actually believe and that you're willing to be held accountable to. So the accountability of the core value seems to be half the battle, unless I'm
Huge,
mistaken.
huge, huge. And not only that, I believe that as part of the framework, you have to enable, you have to institutionalize this decision-making process using core values into day-to-day living.
Right.
So for example, all of your business processes, your recruiting process, your hiring and orientation process, your marketing process, your sales processes, your financial processes, your logistics processes, your procurement processes. I mean, if you live like this, then guess what? Your RFP process, when you put stuff out to have potential suppliers propose on it, has got to be rock solid based on those core values. Your financial processes. So, for example, you know how many companies fudge numbers and play games and stray into that gray area,
Yeah.
and they take down reserves or reduce the reserves in order to show a profitable quarter, and you know, things like that that are really, I mean, part of what got us in trouble was the games we were playing with deals. We, you know, the Justice Department ended up referring to them as three-corner deals. um, you're going to be a systems integrator that resells my product, and I end up investing in you, but you take the money that I give you, and you end up, I tell you to use the money I give you to buy product from one of my distributors. And so as long as, if I disclose it, it's okay. It's perfectly a perfectly good deal. But if I don't disclose that I've got a relationship with you and with the distributor, and that you're using my money to buy product from the distributor, you know, that's not the right way to do business. So,
Right.
you know, I believe you got to ingrain this. I call it institutionalize it in all of your business processes across the board. You know, so whether it's how you purchase stuff, whether it's the deals you go into, your sales process, your marketing materials,
Yeah.
you know, disparaging your competitors, that is not ethical. If one of your one of your core values is to be honest and have integrity in what you say in the marketplace, and to stand behind your product, and you know, things like that. So, you know, product recalls, perfect example of companies that try and hide or avoid product recalls, and all of a sudden you find all this internal documentation and memorandums about a product that was really unsafe, you know, and there's no integrity in that kind of environment. And the interesting thing is, guess who you end up attracting to come work for you?
That's right.
Same kind of
That's
people.
right. And it works either way. I mean, if you're really solid on doing X, then people who are really solid on doing X opt in. And if
Yeah,
you're really not, and you're all about just shady money, whatever, you attract the shady money, whatever people. That's
yeah,
right.
yeah. And then guess what? You have no one really kind of raising their hand and saying, this doesn't smell right. And hey,
Right.
before we enter into this deal, we ought to talk about the fact that this company is notorious for doing this kind of thing in the marketplace. And then finally, the last thing you talked about it just a few minutes ago. Who do you surround yourself with?
Hmm.
I call it, I borrowed the phrase from a guy, Jim Rohn, who I respected and followed very much.
Love Jim.
He calls it voices of value. Right? Who do you surround yourself that you are going to allow to whisper in your ear that is a voice of value? So you need to have this in place before you start making decisions, because by the time decisions are in front of you to be made, it's too late if you don't have it established. So the voices of value are people either from academia, from the business world, from your social circles, from whoever that you have vetted and that you have been able to convince that you want to rely on them to help you with the more complex decisions.
Hmm.
I mean, the day-to-day stuff you do and you make, and as long as you're basing it on solid principle, you're good. But some of these complex decisions, and I've talked to CFOs that say, the accounting rules in some cases are vague. And I said, so how do you work around that? And how do you figure out that you're doing the right thing? He goes, you do the best you can by surrounding yourself with people who know and who live their lives the way that you want to live your life,
Hmm.
and who have made solid decisions. Can you imagine some of these companies that meet Wall Street expectations or beat it by a penny every single quarter? General Electric met and exceeded Wall Street expectations for, I don't know, 40, 48 quarters, whatever it was, during the Jack Welch era. And then afterwards, whoever his successor was, I forget the
I
guy's name.
think it was
Oh, Jeff
Immel.
Immel. Jeff
Yeah.
Immel. Yeah. And so doesn't anybody wonder, scratch their head and go, oh, what's going on here? You
Yeah,
know,
as long as the money. So here's the thing: as long as it works, people are generally safe, even if they know that something shady or odd is going on. But as soon as it doesn't work, that shadiness gets exposed in a heartbeat.
exactly.
So even if you look like you're safe, if you're doing that kind of thing, you are definitely not safe. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a very dangerous place to be.
It's a slippery slope.
Yep.
And once you're on it, it's all over. And so I found myself in that situation. And I was a stock option millionaire. I lived in a mansion. I had it all. I had the world by the tail. I traveled all over the world. I had 2,000 people working for me, a huge patent portfolio of technology patents, very talented engineers, products that were respected worldwide. We weren't as big as Cisco. Cisco was a multi-billion-dollar company. We got to be a $500 million company in revenue. I was rubbing shoulders with famous people. Yoko Ono was on my speed dial.
Wow.
I had friends in celebrities, but that got to my head, and my inexperience and my lack of having a framework and having a solid base of core values is what did me in.
Yeah.
And
So
I go ahead.
that's what I was about to ask is what could now in hindsight, what could have prevented it? So if you had the core values, if you had accountability that was holding you to that, because just having the core values we know is not enough,
Right.
right? You need so and one of the things that I find really interesting is I've said this in class, I've never seen a great leader that I trust that eschews accountability. If they if they're like, no, I don't need your accountability, I don't need those constraints, it's just going to hold me back. That makes me nervous like nothing I've ever seen before. I mean,
Yeah.
it right. Great leaders welcome it because they know that they can't see what they can't see.
Right. Well, here's what happened, right? It got to the point where I had so much pressure on me that I accepted the pressure to perform, to do things, and to take the shortcuts. And so what happened there? Well, typically what happens is you start listening to the people who are giving you advice to take the shortcuts, because you need to make the numbers this quarter. You need to make the numbers, instead of standing up and saying, we're not going to commit any unnatural acts. We're not going to violate our core principles. And if we're having a bad quarter because the marketplace is tough, so be it. And if the stock gets pummeled as a result, so be it. I fired a guy who told me, by the way, Henry, tomorrow, people call me Henry. He says, tomorrow the sun's going to shine and we're going to have a next quarter after this one and a quarter following that one. And as long as we stay true to the course, we will eventually get rewarded for our efforts. Don't rob tomorrow to make today. Don't, we would be trying to bring deals in by cutting prices, which is not illegal, but, we would be taking all kinds of shortcuts. We would be playing games, and he was not a game player. And I had a lot of pressure to fire him. I ended up firing him. He's still my friend to today, this day. But the bottom line is, if I had had the core values and I had institutionalized them into the day-to-day decision-making framework of the company, so that it's not just shelfware, it's not laminated cards that people have in their wallets, it's not posters, it's real.
Yeah.
And if you find a violation, one of the things you can't do is tolerate the violation, because people have to know that it has teeth, And if I had surrounded myself with better people, not just inside the company, I'm talking about outside the company as well, that were a handful of folks that I had vetted and were truly competent and truly lived their lives and their whole careers by core values and principles, then obviously there's no guarantee in life, but I think I would have been in a much better position to do what needed to be done, to do the right things for the right reasons,
So as I'm hearing you talk, I'm thinking about this. Uh, every institution has different values, right? And it's not a one size fits all. I mean, it has to be appropriate for the organization in its cultural context in the market, right? So I'm thinking of CSU. I teach at Charleston Southern. We have epic values. This is kind of a newer thing with our new president. He's been here for about 3 years. He's a retired 2-star general, and apparently they don't just give out those stars. The guy's got it together, right? So he came in and he started focusing on, and it is described epic. So extra mile service, a passion for student success, innovation across the institution, and in Christian community. We're a Baptist school, okay? So those things. Now, you have to then say extra mile service. That's one of your core values. And you have to praise it every time you see it. And you have to make sure that when you aren't doing that, that somehow you're going, no, you can't not do that. We have to be doing this, or that just becomes a statement on the wall and it doesn't work. Exactly. So tell me about how you embed those core values within the organization.
Right. So this is the tough part, right? Because this is where the rubber meets the road. The tough part is, first of all, if you're starting a new organization, then you have kind of a green field, and so it's a lot easier. But if you're taking over an organization, the first thing you have to do is get everybody on the same level set, if you will, in terms of what these things are and what these things mean. So you're talking about a lot of orientation, a lot of training, a lot of grassroots. People have to buy into it, and they have to buy into it hook, line, and sinker. I mean, this has got to be now a way of life. Yeah. And so some people may not last. Some people, I can almost guarantee you, in any organization where you try this, you're going to have a fallout. And so be it, because if you're really serious about it, you've got to have people that listen to your talk, watch your walk, and then follow the walk with their own walk, so that it permeates throughout the entire organization.
Yeah, so everything you said is right. I would back up though, and I would say how that is created, you'll get a lot less fallout if they're part of the process of creating it.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. So as an example, a core values exercise is not me as the leader saying, here are your 6 core values, go get them. No, it's putting together a group, a cross section of people. Maybe you start with a department, or maybe you start with a group, representative group, respected employees, people that have met a certain criteria. and you go through an exercise. And I mean, there's a dozen ways to create core values. There's red light, green light sessions, and there's Delphi, and there's all kinds of methods by which you start bubbling these up, and then you start honing in on them and honing in on them, and then you do a lot of communication and vetting and getting people to buy in. Because if you have buy-in, if you've had people help create this, then, as you say, you don't really need to sell it because they've been part of the creation process. And
Right.
then it's a matter of educating the entire organization and making sure that department heads walk the talk, that the business processes are infused with this stuff, so that people know, hey, this isn't just lip service. This is when our student acceptance process, right, is got to be part of this. It's the way we examine people who apply to this college, this university, and the way we accept them has got to be consistent with our core values.
Right.
The way we hire professors or we promote professors, the way that we do things in the community, the way we go after endowments and what we do with all of the business processes that are particular to your industry, whether it's an industrial firm or a university or a professional services organization, or whatever it is, and again, it's constant. This is not something you do and then you put away and you're done. This is a way of life. If you don't do it as a way of life, and this is where it gets tough, because it takes a lot of work, it takes effort, it takes dedication. But I think the results, there's a company that publishes a survey, or they track performance of the most ethical companies and compare it to an index. And there's like a 15% overperformance for companies that are deemed to be ethical. I can share the
Yeah,
graph.
that's right. That's right. And you see that for ethical surveys. You see that for how they treat their employees.
Right.
You see that in multiple ways. Those that have the strongest values, those that do what you just said, those that treat their employees best are
They outperform.
heads and shoulders above other companies in performance, generally speaking.
And then when you're in that kind of organization and your head hits the pillow, you feel good. And when you wake up in the morning, you don't feel the weight of the world on your shoulders, because in the back of your mind, or maybe even in the front of your mind, you're doing some wrong things. And it's only a matter. I mean, the worst day of my life was when 2 FBI agents came knocking on my door.
Yeah, I would
And,
imagine.
and I knew it was over,
So
So
did you realize that, hey, I shouldn't be doing this, or did you just think, you know, everybody does it? Or
I was raised differently. I'm writing a book. In fact, I write every morning, and I just finished a section that I call Lessons from My Father. He was actually my stepfather. Go
I
ahead.
got to interrupt. You posted, and so we got to know each other here in my leadership forum, right? And so where we just talk about great ideas about leadership, and you posted something. I don't know if it was there or somewhere else, about every Saturday you write with a group of writers. That wasn't that you?
Every morning.
Every morning, okay, you write with a group of writers
Yeah.
online. They just sit there and silently write.
Yep. I
Tell me
just
about that process. What's that been like?
Oh, that's been fantastic. I mean, I was stuck at around 20,000 words like a year ago, and I'm at 75,000 words now. So I get up every morning, and at 8 a.m. Eastern, we get on Zoom. This morning, I think there must have been 160 people on Zoom. So here we are. And we do some introductions, and they write something or they read something that is supposed to be inspirational, and then 50 solid minutes of writing. Nobody says a word, and you've got these people. You think think they're looking at you, and really they are, because you're on camera, they're on camera, and it's an accountability thing.
Yeah,
They are your accountability partners.
that's right.
You know.
I was just gonna use that word, accountability. I mean, this is the core of the problem that we were just talking about, was
Yeah.
accountability.
Yeah.
And yeah, we need that. I'm sorry, I interrupted with the writing. You were about to tell me about the book and your father and whatever else.
Yeah. So when I revisit the lessons, And this is a guy had a sixth grade education and ended up being superintendent of a pretty big shoe factory in South Florida at the time. So self-made man and brilliant in terms of leadership skills, raw leadership skills and life lessons that he was full of. And he took every opportunity from the time when I was 17 years old and I came home drunk, and the way he handled that and the lesson he taught me without having to say a word or lift a finger, and when I revisited those lessons, I realized, hey, it wasn't my upbringing. So I knew that we were doing some wrong things. When I started on that endeavor to take the company public, I I hired a couple of folks and I appointed a couple of people to the board that I knew from previous lives that I said they're going to help me make this company different, and we're going to be a different company because the company had had some shady. I mean, there was a joke that the auditors, KPMG, would actually walk the floor of the warehouse close to midnight on the last day of the quarter to make sure that trucks weren't loaded past midnight, because that's the rule. Midnight, the day of the quarter, you can't count anything that ships
Sure.
as a sale at 12:01.
Mhm.
And there were literally auditors that would walk the floor trying to make sure. And there were plenty of examples of trucks that would leave at 11:59 full of empty boxes
Uh,
or stuff that was shipped without customers really ordering it in order to count it as
just
revenue.
just to pull the wool over their eyes, kind of
Just to
thing.
pull, yeah, just to make the numbers. And I vowed we weren't going to be that way, but I succumbed to the pressure and ended up getting into this, you know, tailspin and circular drain where it was just absolutely. I mean, I did things that I knew were wrong and I shouldn't have done, and I wish I had been stronger, but I wasn't. I paid the price. Guess what? There was a consequence for my actions, and I said, and I got divorced. I lost touch with my children for a decade. I remarried, and the lady I married stuck behind me. She was there. She actually took me to prison when I self-reported, turned myself in to the federal prison here in Miami. And I said to her, and she agreed. I said, I've got to take accountability for this. That's the only way I'm going to be able to live with myself for the rest of my life.
Yeah. So, wow. So, I'm guessing that when you started the job, you didn't think, "Yeah, I'm going to be shady." It was a very incremental thing, and by the time you did one thing the wrong direction, you didn't think much of it. And a second one, you didn't think much of it. Hey, this is just me, after all, right? I mean, I'm not, a criminal or
I'm not a
whatever,
bad guy.
right? I
Yeah.
mean, tell me about that process. Is that about how that goes?
Yeah, it is. I think it's a matter of um, it's kind of like you build a tolerance for that kind of
Right.
behavior, and your skin gets a little thicker, and you got people whispering in your ear. And I hired a CFO that I thought had impeccable credentials. He wasn't a bad guy, but I remember 9/11, and he came to me right after 9/11, and he said, hey, we can use 9/11 as a way to get rid of some of this product we have in the channel. And I thought to myself, boy, that's really sick. that
Yeah.
that, that
Wow.
really sounds pretty sick to me, to use a situation where thousands of people have lost their lives. But he had gotten to that point
Yeah.
in trying to make the numbers as well.
Yeah, and it's always and so if you didn't have the pressure of the numbers, it's less likely you would have gone that way. But given that you do have that pressure, and that's part of the job, and you have to accept that, it's just a matter of you have to build those defenses against it, or you just fall into that. And
Exactly.
right?
Exactly. And it was always, well, don't talk to the auditors about that. And well, and by the way, the general counsel of the parent company before I spun off was also a technologist. He had a degree from MIT and a law degree. So it's not like he didn't really understand the business. And he came from a very prestigious Northeastern law firm. Um, and it was like very smart people, but it's not about being smart.
Yeah.
It's about being ethical.
Yeah. So
And
it sounds
ethical
like
is not
multiple
sexy.
systems failure, like your finance guy failure, your council failure, leadership, you failed at
Yeah,
one after another, like all the circuits. You should have had circuit breakers that didn't trip.
right.
But yeah, okay. So tell me, so this is now what you do. You speak about this and go to companies and tell me about that process.
Yeah. So I've had limited success, but not because it isn't a resonating topic. It's because I also have this consulting agreement that I've been on for a couple of years that takes a lot of my time. So I haven't really had the ability to market this. But I'll give you an example. I must have delivered this talk maybe now, 25 times, including to some pretty big audiences. I did a call with 1,000 clients from one of the big accounting firms hired me to do this via Zoom because obviously because of the pandemic, there were 1,000 people in that call. I did another one for a company, a smaller company that hired me to do that for their employees. I did it with another company, about 100 and some odd people, a department from a very, very large company. And it was like, they were like unbelievably blown away by the story and by the process by which you should make decisions and stuff. So
Mhm.
I've done it a number of times. I've been paid well for it. I know it resonates well.
Yeah, sure.
And what I'm trying to do is ramp down this consulting work so that I can ramp this up. Because not just to make money at it, I really feel very that this is a very important topic.
Yeah.
And in today's day and age, there's just a total lack of accountability across the board.
Sure. Sure,
And
and I think there's something philosophical in the cultural milieu that allows it much more likely now than it would just 30 years ago, 40, 50. What I mean, right now the culture has shifted somehow. I can't describe it, but this so personalized. I got to be me. Um, uh,
yeah,
I don't know what it is, but there's something that has shifted away from duty, virtue, honor into self aggrandizement or self focus or something that has made this message even more potent right now than what it
yeah.
was just a generation or two ago.
Yeah, it's interesting. I spoke to a guy that I've known for a number of years. He's an entrepreneur, technologist. He started a bunch of companies, and so I was because part of what I do is kind of reach out to folks to talk about this and to make sure they understand that this is what I'm doing, and if there's any opportunity to share the message that they think about me. And so we were talking, and I started to sense that he wasn't buying in totally. So I started exploring that with him, and I said, what's the issue? He goes, well, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs and a lot of startups. And he says, quite frankly, you cannot put these kinds of shackles on a startup company to be thinking about, always doing the right thing and ethics. And you got to cut corners. You got to, because everybody does it and you're not going to be successful. You're going to be left behind. And I thought to myself, wow,
Yeah, you're putting bad into the DNA from the start if you
from the
come with
start.
that. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's dangerous.
Yeah.
Wow. I so that made me think of this. Like John Wooden said, good values are like a magnet; they attract good people. And if you start without that, then you're going to attract what you don't want. Who's going and personnel is policy, right? I mean, we know that the people are going to make those decisions, and if you start attracting them wrong, wow, that's going to go all wrong.
Yeah.
So, hey, thanks for sharing your story. I appreciate it.
My pleasure. I've come to respect you. I see what you do, and I see what you write, and so I thought let's at least get to know each other a little bit better, and then if nothing comes of it, that's fine. At least we had a great discussion, and I feel like you're a kindred spirit here in terms of what we're talking about, especially with your new president. and his position on this. So
Yes.
that's really refreshing because you guys are shaping and molding the future leaders, the leaders of tomorrow. And I think that's really important because we severely lack for really good role models, not just that know how to make money, but that know how to live life and how to conduct themselves and their companies the way that things should be. So thank you very much for the opportunity.
So tell me this: if anybody here is listening to this right now, how do they get a hold of you if they want you to talk to their organization or they just want to follow up with you?
Sure. So the best way to do it is to just drop me a line at Enrique@Fiallo.com. Enrique@Fiallo.com, Fiallo. And or they can go to www.fiallo.com, and that's my speaking website. It's eventually going to be both my speaking and my coaching because I do one-on-one coaching as well. I have a number of coaching clients, but that's the best way to reach me.
Okay. Well, again, thank you for coming on the program. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Darren. It was a pleasure, and all the best to you.